Just one more book, please.
Okay. Three pieces of advice to an aspiring reader. It's fun. It's fun. It's fun.
Trust your instinct. Find books that you love. You don't have to make any excuse for either reading or not reading a book. And this is probably a terrible thing to say being a writer, but don't feel obligated to finish a book if you're not enjoying it.
Look at the pictures first. If you can't read, you can read the pictures before you can read the words. So that's just the beginning.
You will be surprised at how many books there are out there. Go to your library in school, go to your library in town, go to the bookstore. There are so many books out there that you could sit down and start reading now, and a month from now you would only begin to have read just a tiny bit of what is out there. So if you have anything that you particularly love, you're going to find hundreds of books on the subject.
This is Jarrett Krosoczka speaking here, and if I was asked to give three pieces of advice for aspiring readers, and I would say number one, find books that you enjoy, so find stories that you can get really excited about. And then two, read those books as often as possible, and in your own free time try to read. And then three, create new adventures for those characters and write some of your own stories, and that will get you, the writing will get you back to reading.
I remember when I first learned to read, I would follow my mother around. She would be getting ready to go to a meeting at night, and I can remember just sitting in the bathroom while she put her makeup on. And my first book that I read was about a dog that lived at the fire station, and I just remember how exciting it was. So just to practice reading, and if you don't know what a word, how to read a word yet, ask about it, ask how to read it, and keep practicing it.
My name's Ruth Sanderson. When I was growing up, my very favorite stories were fairy tales, and I would still recommend to people that aspire to read to go out, to seek out different kinds of fairy tales, and you can find them in simplified versions in picture books, and you can also find complete versions of stories such as Grimm's fairy tales in big anthologies. Also, look for books that have subjects that interest you. Another thing that interested me were horse stories, because I love horses. So if you love horses, look for horse stories. If you love cats, look for cat stories. You get the idea. And happy reading.
With reading, it's good to go outside your comfort zone. If you walk into any library, there's so many possibilities. There's no one right way to write. And so as readers, I think sometimes we, maybe because we're tired of reading at the end of the day, we get, we sort of favor one kind of voice or one kind of author. And I think it's really important to just visit the spectrum of writing.
I'm David Milgrim. My advice for aspiring readers, probably first and foremost, is Frog and Toad, Curious George, Dr. Seuss. And here's a fourth thing, a bonus. And that's, read comics.
I say, don't waste your time on a book that you don't really want to read. I know in school you have to read books that you don't want to read, but a lot of people sort of feel triumphant if they get through a book that they have to slog through.
Okay, this is Judy Birdsall. For you readers out there, don't let anybody tell you that what you like isn't the right thing to like. And if you don't like something, that's okay. You don't have to explain it. It's just true. And don't worry about reading things over and over again, because that's the best way to do it.
I just think it would be wonderful to spend more time with a book than with the television or with the computer, because there's so much magic in books and so many worlds to learn about.
This is Jeff Mack. Sometimes what you're reading, you could imagine it illustrated many different ways, and you could ask yourself, why is it illustrated the way that the artist decided to illustrate it? Of all the styles that artists could have chosen to use, why did they choose that one? Just try to find the books that you really love to read and figure out, try to ask yourself, what is it about this book that I really relate to? What's so interesting about this book to me? Is it the characters? Is it the way that the drawings are made? Is it the plot of the story? You can learn a lot about yourself by identifying what it is in the story that strikes you the strongest.
If you don't love it, sometimes it does take a while until you love it, and I think you sort of know that even when you're getting through the beginning of it. But put it down and find another one, because there's always another one.
This is Tony DiTerlizzi, and my 3 bits of advice, I don't know if it's actually 3, but my advice is to a young reader would be to read any and everything. I loved reading the backs of cereal boxes. I loved reading comic books. I loved reading the captions in National Geographic magazines. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a book. If you like to read, find something that suits you, something that interests you, and read.
And that goes for, I actually think adults don't have to, if your kids are now 18 or out of the house, it's still, I think there's some wonderful picture books out there, and certainly the old classics like Charlotte's Web or, some of these novels that we read as kids, I think are still great reads.
This is Barry Moser, and the question is, if I understand it right, what advice would I have to a youngster about reading? And I can only come up with one at this moment, and that is, don't be afraid of it. When I was a kid, I was very afraid of reading. I was slightly dyslexic, couldn't read well, had a hard time conjugating my verbs. Time come to read out loud in front of a class, I would choke up, couldn't do it, scared me to death. It was after college that I started to read, and now I read 75 books a year, something like that. My wife reads about 250, so.
You're a slow reader.
I'm a slow reader.
The other thing about advice for readers, for me, would be read all books. I read children's books. I love children's books. Occasionally I prefer a middle grade novel to an adult book. So I know there's a lot of school pressure also to read right on your level. But I believe that you'll learn new things by reading things that might be a little over your level. And
a little under your level.
You learn everything by reading things that are way under your level.
I'm Norton Juster.
No, I'm Norton Juster.
No, he's Norton Juster.
I'm Norton Juster.
I think reading to kids is quite wonderful, and I think what I used to do with my granddaughter, which works well, is we share the reading. I'll read a chapter, then she reads a chapter, and it goes back and forth. And you'll be surprised how quickly you get through a whole book, because they won't stop.
I'm Shelley Rotner. To see, either through words or photos or illustrations, a different way of seeing the world, to learn something, and to enjoy.